Hello and welcome to a fun little video here on cleaning out an Epson damper assembly. This is off a 7900, also 9900 uses the same thing. These guys see a lot of neglect. These little dampeners here all have their own little filter assemblies in them. Those build up a bunch of dried up ink, debris and other such stuff that causes printhead problems. So just because you have a clog doesn't mean that the head itself is clogged. These things are really common. Here we have some basic tools. Your handy dandy syringe. Make sure you use a slip tip, not a lure lock, not the little twist lock ones. You want that nice clean tip. If you accidentally buy lure locks, you can typically take a razor blade, cut along the perimeter, and snap that little collar off. You can pick them up at like farm supply, veterinary supply, and so forth. They'll carry that type of stuff. Expect to around a couple of bucks. You can also order them on the usual places like eBay, Amazon, or wherever you like. For cleaning solvent, we're just using a little coffee mug here full of roughly 10% simple green. I also have these little clear plastic trays. These are just packaging from some cables we had on hand. Nothing too spectacular. You can use a baking sheet, just something to catch the wastewater. What we're going to do is, you want to remove your dampener assembly, obviously. There are two little wires in there. You're going to have to usually remove the top cover to get to the access port to pull those out. Some people actually cut the lines and use new connectors. We do that for some of our test printers. Works really well. Allows us to take it out without removing a single panel. We'll show printhead removal pretty soon in another video. Just kind of trying out a new format here. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to take our dampener. You're going to check right here. You're going to see these little ports. Keep in mind there are two ports that are not going to get flushed. The first one is either going to be your photo or matte black, depending which the selector had set to off. There's no ink path between the dampener and the tube for it. This is not too big of a deal. If you really want, you can actually manually jog the little drive shaft here. A little smooth guy, but you can actually flip that ink switcher back and forth if you want. Not a big deal. The main thing we're doing is we're going to get the build off out of these actual double damper assemblies. Now these top pieces can actually, the damper is actually in two pieces. You have the port, which are the actual two jets, on this single plastic piece that clips on over the main dampener assembly. If those pop off, they just snap right back in. Not a big deal. For cleaning, pretty straightforward. You're going to want to make sure you locate your ports, and since I'm using two small catch trays, I'm going to line them up here. Take here and here. Set the syringe off to the side. Not too big of a deal. So we'll take our slip tip syringe. I'm actually going to drop a little bit of simple green on each port just to let the ink start to break up. You get little clumps and stuff. These things are typically pretty dirty. This has been removed a few times, so you get a lot more waste ink pooling. A lot of times it'll just be on the port, but this is just a salvage printer that was pretty shot. We just gutted a whole bunch of parts off it. We'll take a little Q-tip here. Be mindful these do leave behind fibers, so keep some tweezers on hand. One thing to help reduce that is to twist the Q-tip as you're going, just to keep the fibers tightly bound. And we're going to be going through quite a few of these little guys, but it doesn't take too terribly long. Since I already wetted, I'm going to kind of take a shortcut here. The actual rubber is a light gray. That does not correspond to a light black or anything like that. It's just the color of the rubber. Be mindful that most of the interaction between the head and the dampener is just in this area. So if there's ink over here, it's not a huge deal. You can go a little OCD on your cleaning and that's fine. Or you can just say screw it and leave it as is. In certain circumstances, you can actually see that might not be too super visible, and make sure to actually upload it at a good bit rate. But these little seals can actually pull out a little bit. Not a huge deal. As long as they're not torn or damaged or anything, you'll be alright. So, got most of these picked up here. But otherwise, pretty straightforward. Epson has, they actually have recommended service intervals for replacing these dampeners. The main reason being that they clog. There's not a whole lot of pressure in them, so these don't rupture very often. Normally when they do rupture, it's people being a little heavy-handed with them. I've only run into that once. You can actually take these apart, the actual assembly, by removing the screws over on this side. This black plastic piece will come off. And these 3 dampeners, if they're damaged, these are a really common type. You can put like a shim down in there because there are 2 little plastic legs that you'll see on this side. There are corresponding legs on the other side that hold these dampeners in, but they're only clipped in. So if you run a shim down there, like a thin screwdriver or something similar, you could actually lift these and just tug them out. Not a big deal. I'm going to be saying a lot. I'm not too used to recording videos. So here we're going to start feeding some pressure in. Not a lot, we just need a little bit. As you can see, starting to bleed. That's to be expected. This channel I've already flushed quite a bit. The flow is dang near clear. That's what you want. If you want to take a second syringe on hand, take it, fill it with air, not too hard. You can actually push out the remaining cleaner. You will, seeing as I'm using Simple Green, it does foam. This is not a big deal. Be mindful when you're pushing fluids through, you might actually, the gasket surface around here, you can actually knock that gasket off if it's loose. It's not a bad idea to pull those gaskets off carefully with a pair of tweezers and soak them in Simple Green or whatever solution you prefer. I don't have any recommendations for magic print head cleaners. Most of them are very expensive water. I have not found anything that I would recommend. Original Formula Windex, alcohol, Simple Green, those are the 3 main cleaners you'll have people suggest. For flushing, I recommend distilled water. It doesn't leave behind residue. These are aqueous printers, so it's not going to interact with the ink in any way, shape, or form. And as such, they tend to be pretty compatible with most systems in the printer. It also tends to evaporate cleanly. Alcohol has the bonus of evaporating much faster, but by no means is it required. Alright, so we're going to take this little tray here. Hopefully you can see what's going on. If you actually look in here, you'll see lots of solid particles of ink. This stuff builds up over time. That's why the dampeners have the screen. That's part of their job. They provide even, consistent flow of ink to the print heads, as well as filtration. This is why you need to either flush or change these on a regular basis. Despite Epson pricing their ink as if it's made from the highest quality virgin non-contaminating materials, stuff dries up. That's just how ink works. I have no problem with aftermarket inks. Some of them I actually prefer. The price point of running one of these printers makes it very difficult to operate unless you're using it as a business type item. Alright, so we got the blue coming through. I'm going to lift it up on my side. You want to keep your syringe somewhat straight up and down. Alright, we're getting, you're probably not seeing this, but we're getting a pretty clear flow. We're going to move on to the next one, which I believe will alternate sides. Here we go. So the worst inks I've found tend to be green and yellow. Green is notorious from printers I do little autopsies on, or gut for parts, because sometimes they're just too far gone. Green, if you let it sit, the ink will turn into solid masses that will actually block your lines completely. Flushing your dampers, I recommend over doing a full-on ink line flush, but we will cover flushing ink lines on a later date. It is a bit more involved. It's way more expensive. You'll use a lot more ink, obviously, and it's gonna be a mess. As you can probably see from the ink stains all over this counter, we get quite a bit going through. Our orange here seems to be pretty clear. I don't typically find too many problems with orange. This is a case though where clean it all out. You got your damper assembly removed. Simple Green's cheap. It's only a little bit of labor now, and it'll save you a bunch of time in the future. I've run people through quite a bit of this on eBay quite often. When you're doing this, do not run an init fill afterwards, for the love of God. It's not worth running $300 worth of Epson ink through your print heads to eliminate a small air bubble. The regular cleaning cycle has no problem pulling air out of the system. So yeah, a little bit of back pressure on that one. I'll actually pump the syringe up and down a little bit to kind of help break things up. But our water is coming out pretty clear. You see it? Nice and clean. Yellow, yeah, it's a little chunky. Once again, this guy I think sat for, the printer sat for 3 years. Power surge damaged the main board. The print head was shot, so I tore it down for parts and pieces. These things are really cheap to get a hold of. The Epson 9900 series, if you're going to buy one as a parts unit, don't spend more than $250. It's not worth going for that much more, gambling on a print head. Always get a nozzle check. Make sure it's recent. Some sellers will guarantee, but especially if you're buying out of state, if you're freighting that thing over, it is just a huge hassle. So next is kind of doing a secondary run over everything. There's going to be some liquid buildup. There's going to be a little bit. You can probably see the syringe bleeding off. I know it's not the most ideal of angles, but you'll need to make sure things are drained off. There are no real electrical connections inside the damper well, aside from I believe a Hall effect sensor that tells the ink switcher whether or not it's switched to photo or matte black, and the actual motor itself. But you can see there's a little bit of a mess. Yeah, obviously if you're doing this, you're going to want to have a good stash of paper towels. You gotta love the cheap commercial ones. Half a mile long and the thinnest material on earth, but we're not going after comfort here. Bulk paper towels are your friends. So right now I'm just doing a little bit of scrub. You can see our different inks. The inks will inherently be heavier than the cleaner. So not everything you see is just horrible, nasty, evil stuff that you're cleaning out. Some of it's just inherent. The amount of cleaner you're going to use is going to vary depending on how much you're flushing out. There's no set amount you need to go through. But right now, I'm going to clean up these seals. Just running over them with a Q-tip. These guys are really flat. I don't have the part number handy, but I use Sign in China. They're actually not a bad site for the price. You're going to save quite a bit of money, but you're also going to have that long wait. Stuff like damper gaskets, if you're running more than one of these printers, or even if you're just running one, I highly suggest buying. They're only a couple of dollars a piece. Buy the damper gaskets, have them on hand. It's the same gasket for these two. The lines are identical, and also when you're connecting to the back of the cartridge bay, those are going to be the exact same connectors. So these gaskets are used 4 times in the system. So nothing wrong with buying extras. These guys, though, I'll actually pull them up real fast. I'll take one of our fancy evil needle syringes here. Yeah, the gasket is actually like completely flattened out over time. So since I'm using a needle, it's less than ideal. Let's use a 22 gauge. That'll be a little finer. It might not come out, but we'll see. Come on, little guy. Since this is a black rubber gasket on black gloves, you're not going to be able to see anything, so let me put this on a paper towel and give you guys a closer look. Yeah, it's not as bad as I thought initially, but there will be some ink buildup on that, and as I said, it's not a bad idea to soak them in a little simple green. A needle syringe is also quite handy. We'll do. So we'll just kind of flush out this channel here. It's going to fill, we're filling just a little bit of cleaner just to kind of rinse it out. Just pushing air right now. And this is typically a messy thing. You can also go into the channel a little bit, but you got to be very careful not to rupture that membrane. Always recap your syringes. I've seen plenty of people stab themselves in the hand way too many times, myself included. I'm not going to pretend that I haven't. So this is essentially a clean damper. If you want to let it sit overnight, it's not a bad idea. Let things dry out. You're going to have a little bit of a mess on your hand. If you decide to blow dry these using a air compressor, go easy on it. This thin material right here can rupture. If you notice also, you have a dampener assembly here, and you also have the exact same system for more, 5 more dampeners. If you look, it's also sized for one of the TFP print heads. I believe they recycled this design for other printers, so they can actually use a dual print head system just like this. That's actually a destroyed head. We'll pop it on nonetheless. That allows you to do, or that would allow them to do double speed offset printing. So I believe some of the 60-inch printers might actually use a slightly different version of this dampener assembly. Anyways, there's not a whole lot more to go on this. If you have any questions, feel free to ask in the comments. I don't typically provide a lot of tech support on these things, except whenever I sell refurbished heads, which is a whole fun field in and of itself, because Epson is not good about publishing their service manuals. Everything's a trade secret to them. As a result, documentation tends to be from sketchy sources. They do a lot of takedown notices, even on their stuff from like the really old printers. The service program, if you can locate one, you can buy it from a sketchy source, typically $10-20. It's not a bad deal. If you have a 7900 or 9900 and you want the service program, feel free to hit me up through eBay, or not eBay, YouTube. I'll leave that in because I'm too lazy to edit. But that'll actually allow you to run counter clears, which a counter basically says, hey, this part's been in for this long. Well, these parts don't have time chips or any other indicators that tell them how long they've been in the system aside from those codes. So if you run the service program, said, hey, dampener assembly has been changed, tube assembly has been changed, you're less likely to get service flags for those particular things. You can buy tubes as well. Same thing applies with dampeners. I have no problem with just flushing them. I do keep a dampener assembly on hand in stock, but I don't like to use them. They're very rarely worth the expenditure unless something is completely destroyed. Do a little shake, you'll see a few little drops coming out. That's to be expected. You can look on the side here. If you actually take a look at the ink, you'll notice mostly transparent. The dampeners are double-sided, so this little circular valve here will be the exact same on the other side, and the lines will just cross. Otherwise, not a whole lot to go. I know it's a little bit long-winded. Keep in mind, if you do break these tabs, which I see happen all the bloody time, who cares? Seriously, like these tabs have very little purpose. They offer no structural rigidity whatsoever. Everything is afforded through, you get the 6 screws. You get here, 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 and then you get the 3 on the bottom. So don't be too surprised if you see these snapped off. If you want, you can even go as far as to remove these assemblies and just wash the whole thing out in a sink. But it's still good to push fluids through these actual ports. You're going to push it this way because you're fighting the filter screens. You're rinsing those screens out. If you push it this way, you might just force stuff back through those screens. Anyways, thanks for bearing through. If you made it this far, if you didn't, that's fine too. If you got something useful, I don't care if you like. I don't care if you subscribe. I'm not gonna sell you anything unless you want to buy stuff. That's cool. We're not selling super duper magic bullet piezo flush whatever. I can't recommend those chemicals. They're not gonna help you. But you know, the main thing is you just got to take stuff apart. That's what it boils down to. These are great printers, but they are a little bit maintenance queens. But what do you expect when you're pulling 1200 plus DPI out of a, you know, bloody crazy tiny ass little printhead port like these guys have? We've got piles of these things that are just blown up. If anybody wants any to dissect, let us know. You know, we do teardowns on them all the time. We do salvage parts, so if you do have bad dampeners or bad ink port assemblies, these are the actual dampener connector from the head. We keep these on hand just in case people need them, as well as the gaskets. The gaskets do sometimes go bad. If you see colors mixing, there's a good chance your head's shot. If you see that you're only getting a tiny bit, like less than 20% of a nozzle check, there's a good chance you have ink starvation, which is caused by something in the system isn't flowing right. I don't know how many times I've had people send me in a head for exchange, only to have it pass nozzle check. The ink, you want to shake it every once in a while. You gotta run these things. Run them often. But I appreciate your time. I'm finally going to shut up now. Thank you very much.